Welcome to Own Your Zone. My name is Jinan, Glasgow, George, and Own Your Zone is a conversation about how companies can differentiate their businesses from the pack, provide unique value, and craft a competitive advantage in rapidly growing markets by leveraging intellectual property and IP data trends. I'm going to be sharing tips on how to own your zone. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Jacob Martin, who is the NFT lawyer. He runs his own firm in Malibu, California, where he focuses his practice on blockchain, entertainment, art, IP, and NFTs, non-fungible tokens. We've seen NFTs explode in the mainstream media and on the markets. So let's explore this topic with Jacob today. Welcome to Own Your Zone. Thanks for joining us, Jacob. It's good to have you on the podcast. I'd love to ask you to introduce yourself to our audience for a second.
Yeah, for sure. My name is Jacob Martin. I am an attorney out of Malibu, California. I have kind of a cheeky Twitter title, says the NFT attorney. Primarily because that's what I'm working on these days. But I work on things blockchain, entertainment, IP, and met Jinan through some of those interesting conversations.
Well, we've seen a lot about NFTs in the mainstream news, mainstream media for sure. What's really happening right now with NFTs?
Just for context for anyone listening, like an NFT being a non-fungible token, right? So this is some amount of a signed digital collectible or a digital entity or item with collector value, speculative value. But what's really happening now, which is what the transition is, utility is what is going to be key. Mm-hmm. So is it a video gaming asset? Is it your ticket to a game? Is it, what is the NFT beyond just a cool $1,000 digital thing that you get to say you have? Yeah. And I think that's where things are transitioning. I spent time in Miami with a bunch of people working on different versions of this, and everyone is thinking along the same lines. Like, how do we make our conference ticket an NFT? How do we bring utility and make it worth, utilizing an NFT as a gaming asset? So that's what I think the next wave is, and the current wave.
Yeah, and we're starting to see some larger corporations get into the mix. I noted in the last week, IBM announced recently that they're collaborating with a group called IPWE to represent patents as NFTs. As you know, I'm a patent attorney, so it kind of strikes my fancy. It seems the utility there is pretty clear. The tokenization of IP can help position patent assets, which are intangible assets, to be more easily sold, traded, commercialized, or otherwise be monetized. It's a great way to bring more liquidity, if you will, into the patent space. Where else are you seeing the functionality?
So I think the patent one's interesting too, because I had someone reach out to me months ago asking if they could, we have a patent or we have a thing we'd like to patent, can we release it? And releasing a patent as an NFT in the same sense that you send yourself a letter with an idea in the mail to prove that you did it, right? Like, sure, there's some utility there, but one of the bigger gaps, and I've got one client trying to do this specifically, and not with patents, but with IP for like television, is how do you make the purchaser, how do you make the end consumer utilize that NFT at purchase? Yeah. Right? Because it's a great way to split royalties, to split ownership, to split creation, but not if the end user isn't purchasing the NFT you created, right? If they just say, I'm going to use this patent because I'm going to make this chair that you patented, then it kind of defeats the utility, right?
Yeah.
Where I think I'm seeing the most right now is, obviously Gary Vee with V Friends, like going to his conference for 3 years, like that one is you can see where that didn't have to be on chain, right? Like you could just buy 3 years worth of ticket access.
Yeah.
But for him, it allows him to pump the community and participate in the resale.
Yeah.
because you know it's going to resale for 3 years. So
Yeah, for sure. Well, one of the themes of our podcast is own your zone. I mean, it's about competitive positioning. And obviously, as a patent attorney, we think about exclusivity. It seems like there's a lot of overlap with the NFTs. We've seen it with art. We've seen it a little bit with sports and a few other things. But this ETHLings and other utility applications, gaming for sure, seems pretty fascinating. Talk a little bit about the difference between the legal side or the legal issues, how you're carving out some zone for yourself with the technology law, but there's also art law, there's IP that relates to it. What are you seeing there? And of course, then the art side, if we're talking art, or the coding side, if we're talking, software assets.
like while I was on a call with you just now, I got a DM from one of the guys that runs Sotheby's digital department. Like, because I've worked with the auction house, but it's not because I know art better than a 30-year art attorney. It's because I know technology better than a 30-year art attorney.
Yeah.
So I'm having the conversations as someone who understands just enough about the tech, just enough about the art, just enough about the middle. And then when I like recognize a legal pressure point that's beyond me, I call an expert.
You're kind of like the NFT systems integrator, aren't you?
A little bit. Yeah.
My engineering recovered self, I think systems integration, you're really pulling a lot together, making it coordinate. I mean, there's a lot of value in that. I love your approach to it. Yeah, and when we think about the functionality or the utility, that's when we'll start getting into patents a little bit more.
Yeah.
As that a gaming applications, of course, lots of patents there. It'll expand pretty quickly. What advice would you have to a company or an individual who's thinking about getting involved with NFTs or creating their own? We've certainly known a lot of people have interests, but how do they really go about it?
I think that the concept of community is just continually undervalued and understated by people who see money on the table, right? Like, there are only a few creators and a few projects that have made any kind of meaningful money where there weren't months or even years of community building, right? Yeah. People were like so surprised by Beeple's sale, but he had 13 years of posting basically a thought every day. So people thought they really knew Beeple. So I think people miss that a lot. Invest in a community manager, invest in building out a cool Discord group. I mean, I just got a note this morning that Gary Vee's Discord hit like 250,000 members. I think the next closest is probably only 40,000 at Nifty Gateway. Like he just put community first and it worked. And he made $100 million in a week, right? Like, yeah. So if you want to win, there's your formula. And right now, I know a couple people at Fortune 500s that are just kind of, what famous person can we work with so that we can sell some of these? Yeah, that's not going to work.
Do you think that's one reason maybe we haven't seen a lot on the sports memorabilia or the sports side or the celebrity side? What do you think about that?
Well, we've seen a lot of celebrity attempts for sure. I think one of the bigger gaps with the athlete side of things is the leagues aren't giving free reign to use IP. So like championship rings and other specific IP, the league is saying you can't use our IP. And so if you can't use the league's IP, or, I haven't talked to any of the leagues myself. I've talked to some people that have negotiated with them, but like, if you can't, if you know what I mean, if you're going to sell a Gronk NFT, Gronk worked because Gronk is an internet personality, but the card itself is kind of bland. Yeah. It's a guy in a football jersey with no logos on it, right? Like, so that didn't work for the next 5 people that tried. It only worked for Gronk because Gronk throws great parties and Gronk is a great personality.
I feel like you've really got your finger on the pulse of this right now from just the entire ecosystem standpoint. What's coming that we haven't talked about yet? What do you see? I feel like you're a bit of a visionary on this, Jacob.
One thing that I am very hopeful about, and it's funny because I mentioned my old startup earlier, like wills and trusts on smart contracts. Like, I think so the real estate, did you see this last week? Proppy started a real estate NFT.
I didn't see that.
Okay, so I think it's Proppy, Propy NFT, and they're selling an apartment. And they claim to be the first to do it, but they're not. I've seen multiple others on like OpenSea over the last few months, but they might be the first like legit company to do it, where it's all the paperwork is tied into one. You click a button, you pay Ethereum, you get the deed, you get everything. And so wills and trusts, real estate, title transfer for your car, like I think things like that are the way that like some of the OG Ethereum devs say this is like they never would have thought that art would be the thing that made smart contracts go mainstream, but that is going to likely be the thing that makes smart contracts go mainstream. Because I hope, right? I mean, I sat in a law firm office in LA a few weeks ago. They talked about moving $500 million on behalf of a client one time from Australia to the US. And it was like, Visa gave them or whoever the bank was, it was a 2-week time window. And at one point, they just weren't sure where the money was. And I was like, okay, well, Visa just signed up to do USDC transfers on the Ethereum network because it's automatic.
Yeah.
And it's 30 seconds later, the 500 million is there. So those are the derivatives off of NFTs that I think are gonna happen. And maybe NFTs are still the right terminology 5 years from now, and maybe that word changes quite a lot. But either way, I think some amount of smart contracts in the mainstream is the route. Like that's got to be what happens next.
Yeah, we saw a lot with Harbor for real estate, right? With their tokenization to keep an evergreen fund or something like that. But I'm really liking a disruptor that's in the securities space, doing securities tokenization called Equity Shift. They're in my backyard. Full disclosure, I invested in them as a company and I work with them. But
nice.
They had to go through a lot besides the tech side, the FINRA certification and that sort of thing. Really fascinating to see that. It should open up investment in private entities, right? Because liquidity is a real pain point for angel investors, sometimes VCs, private equity even. So kind of opening up secondaries market seems pretty important as a function.
Yeah, that is, well, I guess that is where, so this is why when I used the term earlier that I'm just kind of like at the front on a lot of this innovation stuff, because what the thing you're talking about right now doesn't sound like NFTs, but at the same time, it blends into the conversation of this automation and the underlying technology. I think the only thing I didn't mention earlier about NFTs specifically that I think will happen next is like, there's still only like 100,000 people playing in the sandbox right now.
Yeah.
Like, I don't mean the sandbox game. I mean, in general, like the sandbox of NFTs, like there's still only, I think Dapper Labs has maybe 500,000 wallets. And like, that's the NBA, like the reach of the NBA is still only 500,000 people. Nifty Gateway has maybe 1 million users. I'm not even sure, that feels high, but if this really hits, then the next wave of NFT platforms, hopefully there's not 2 new ones per week. Hopefully there's like a couple of big ones over the next 6 months that really kind of can like join the battle, I guess, and bring value. But I think the moment we have 10 million active users, that's going to be crazy. I mean, Coinbase has 60 million active wallets now. If there's 60 million on Coinbase, imagine the NFT space going from maybe 1 million users to 60 million users. It's
going to be a revolution, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's going to change. It's going to change the way people think about assets and the way people think about interaction, the way people think about community, the way people think about banks. Right? For goodness sakes. I want to know, there's a lot of interest from investors in this space, like what to invest in, how would you, and not giving investment advice, but what suggestion would you have for investors and their discernment or diligence on what they're interested in?
I think this is one of the first times that I will disagree with typical VC parlance, I guess, which is look at the team and their past success. I don't think past success is as determinative in something that is this Wild West.
Yeah.
Right. Especially if it's legacy success. So I saw a company specifically that raised more money than they should have based on legacy success at legacy brands. And the product that they came out with just wasn't good.
Yeah.
And I would rather see investment in a 19-year-old who has personally made $500,000 in the last 6 months flipping NFTs.
Yeah.
And says, I get it. I get the market. I get the people. Here's who I want to build it with. Here's what I want to build. Here's the gap in the market.
Yeah.
That 19-year-old should get funded very quickly, right? Find them a 27-year-old COO, right? Find them someone to help maybe like boost around them, especially if it's a young person that doesn't have like a robust team.
Yeah.
But I would just say I'm watching some venture capitalists pump serious money for DAO tokens, governance tokens, random projects, just because they don't want to miss the boat. And I think there's a lot of projects there's a lot of people getting funded that shouldn't get funded right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Like the wrong boat, right? Getting in the wrong boat, going down that road.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it's definitely not for the faint of heart. Like this space is, if somebody wants to write like one $50,000 angel check this year, it would be very difficult to pick the right boat.
Yeah.
I think in the NFT space, like everyone's on the same page. 80 or 90% of these companies and assets won't have any value 5 years from now. Like, I know that's the typical thing, but with this one specifically, like you got to be just aware that legacy success doesn't mean anything in the Wild West.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
What do you think of that? Does that like with what you've been seeing? Have you been investing in anything in the space or thinking about it?
Yeah, I've definitely been watching and learning. I think it's a good thing to do and to plug in. I mean, we met through the Clubhouse platform, right? I think that was a good place to hear what's happening kind of in real time and understand that it takes some, I think, fair amount of courage to invest and move into it, and that there's not a formula yet. I mean, apart from the very high level one that you mentioned, there's not really a way to judge what's going to hit or what's not. I mean, I think we saw that the COVID alien, right? Yeah, so that one moving, but if you look at May overall, by the month, the NFT sales were down like 90%, right? So it almost like, just like with the crypto, kind of a big drop or the bubble burst, or there were a lot of things that I read, but I don't think that's what's happening. I think that there's perhaps, as you say, some fatigue in the market, but there's also it's a hard way to judge what to go for and what not. So I think being in it, being involved in it, be in the community before you invest, it's a way to improve your likelihood of success. And I think for an angel investor, it's got to be like, you want it because you want it, not because you're playing this as a 5-year ROI necessarily.
Right.
It hits that, fantastic. It's kind of, I sort of remember my first opening of the wallet, I probably put $500 into Ethereum and the Bitcoin. And then, it was kind of like, ooh, we'd like some of that Doge just because I love Elon Musk, but there's not anything backing that. It's just because I like everything Elon Musk. Like, I'm not saying I have a flamethrower, but it's I think it's an interesting time. So another question I want to pose to you, if somebody today wanted to get into NFTs, what's the steps? Do they, besides just call you, right? From a creator standpoint, somebody who's already an artist, somebody who has a collection, how do they think about the steps of getting into NFT? Let's touch that.
Yeah, so the OpenSea, the NFT Bible on OpenSea is just like the right place to start. It tells you what one is. It helps you kind of understand what's going on. And then the Nifty Gateway founders, Griffin and Duncan, they have some really solid like Medium posts from middle of 2020. What are NFTs?
Yeah.
Like, why would I do this? Basically, those are the ways to look at it, I think, as like a what is this? And then from there, it's kind of like, okay, do I want this? Do I want to talk to the people buying my stuff? Do I want to run a Discord community? Do I want to sell NFTs every few months or whatever, right? Like, what do I want to do? And the more people I've talked to that are basically like, I want to make 100 grand on a drop. I've got old merch. I've got old memorabilia. I've got a cool name. It's like, okay, like this is cool. You can want this, but realize that people don't randomly just want your one-off items more now because they're digital than when they were physical, right? Like you and I talked a couple times about potential Super Bowl jerseys or other things. That jersey is probably independently worth 100 grand or it's not. It doesn't matter if it's digital or if it's physical, right? Like some items don't have outsized value just because they're NFTs.
Yeah.
But a digital piece of art that like Beeple, that he never had a way to sell it really. Now he does have a way to verify it and sell it. That's interesting.
Do you have a closing thought for us? Something
No, this is super fun. I mean,
fabulous.
I think it'll be cool to see, like you were mentioning, like as the gamification comes and Epic builds out their Fortnite metaverse and some of these other things, like the patents are going to be so wild, right? Like the Nike patent on sneakers, and like there's only a couple of those right now that are public. So whatever comes next is going to be pretty crazy.
Let's follow up with that offline. But I want to say thanks again, Jake, for being on this podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Definitely own your zone, and you've earned it. So good luck to you. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for that.
Awesome.
For sure. Bye.
Bye. My name is Jinan, Glasgow, George, and Own Your Zone is a conversation about how companies can differentiate their businesses from the pack, provide unique value, and craft a competitive advantage in rapidly growing markets by leveraging intellectual property and IP data trends. I'm going to be sharing tips on how to own your zone